Xbox 360 has now been around for over a decade, and we've seen 1,173 plus games in that time, and with many still coming out. Some of these games have changed the landscape of gaming forever and became the defining games of this generation. Series like Halo, Mass Effect, Gears of War were what made the Xbox 360 stand out as one of the greatest gaming consoles of all time. However, that is not to say that the system doesn't have its fair share of stinkers as well. With such a massive library of games, it's not surprising there are a ton of games that make you want to pull your hair out. Well, I'm your host as always, K-Mac Time, and today we're taking a look at the top 15 worst Xbox 360 games of all time. Now, before we start this list off, I want to take a second to remind everyone that this video is just my own personal opinions from my own experiences playing this system and these games. If you happen to like a game that's on this list, that's perfectly fine, but you guys should probably stop sniffing glue while you're playing video games. Anyway, let's jump right in with our first game, Sneaking. Sneaking was one of 3 Burger King games, and it was by far the worst and the weirdest. The objective of the game is to sneak around and deliver people Burger King items off the menu. I gave the game somewhat of a break given that it's only a $4.99 title and it's clearly not a AAA title, so you can't expect it to be a great game, but it is beyond terrible. At least the other 2 Burger King games, which was Pocket Bike Racers and Big Bumpin', had a little glimmer of fun gameplay sprinkled in there on top of the crappiness. This one is just straight shit the whole way. It's super repetitive and the controls are also terrible. Getting the full gamer score from this game was a nightmare, and I wanted to put it down the second I picked this game up. If you must play a food-themed video game, I suggest either Pepsi Man or Chester Cheeto games, as they are slightly less trash than this piece of crap. Next up is Tony Hawk Ride. Now, back in the day, the Tony Hawk series was one of my all-time favorites, and I can remember playing Tony Hawk 3 and 4 on the PS2, and then Underground on the GameCube, and that is my all-time favorite skateboarding game of all time. Love that game. But not long after that, the series started to fall from grace. Tony Hawk Ride tried to innovate and tried to revive the series, but it somehow made it even worse. This game introduced the skateboard controller as a new way to play a skateboarding game. And at first, it seemed like an amazing, fresh, new idea, but it turned out to be absolutely terrible. The board controller was hard to use and made controlling the character next to impossible. It took away the ability to chain together massive combos and these over-the-top tricks that the series was known for. It is too bad what has happened to the series, and hopefully it one day can return to its former glory. Our next game is one that should have never existed to begin with. Pimp My Ride was a semi-popular television show in the early 2000s starring the rapper Exhibit. It was made into a game, and for the life of me, I cannot think of why someone thought Exhibit would make for a fun video game character. Yo dog, I put spinning rims on your jet ski. The gameplay is simple and pretty damn boring. It is next to no replayability. That is, if you guys can even stomach it long enough to play it all the way through. It also suffers from extremely low frame rates and screen tearing. Also, the game's graphic leaves much to be desired. IGN gave the game a 2.9 out of 10, and honestly, that is very, very generous, especially when you take into the consideration these weird Ghost Ride the Whip dance rhythm parts of the game. I just don't understand what they were going for. Make sure to steer clear of this turd at all costs. Coming in at number 12 is Beijing 2008, which was developed by Eurogamer and published by Sega and released in, you guessed it, 2008. Now, we have all seen plenty of Olympic sports games released over the years, and honestly, I don't know why that is. I mean, seriously guys, who's buying these things? But the reason that this one in particular makes our list is it was clearly a rushed final product. It has 38 events to choose from, and literally 0 of them are any fun to play. The game does feature online multiplayer and leaderboards, but I'm not sure why they even bothered, as the servers were dead as soon as the Olympics ended in 2008. As a general rule of buying video games, I typically avoid all non-FIFA, Madden, or MLB sports games, and this is a perfect example of why. I would recommend just sticking to watching the actual Olympics and not trying to play them in this shitty video game. Next we have the History Channel Battle for the Pacific, and if the History Channel being in the title wasn't already enough to turn you off, then be prepared to be even more disappointed. It is a terrible attempt to cash in on the popularity of the first-person shooters thanks to the explosion of the Call of Duty series. Except this game tries too hard to keep things historically correct, which translates to no fun in a video game. Couple that with abysmal graphics and a shitty online multiplayer and you come up with this piece of junk game. GameSpot gave this a 2 out of 10 review, which I believe is honestly 2 stars too many. Just cracking our top 10 is BanjoKazooie Nuts and Bolts. And I know many of you are probably gasping at this being on the list. Hell, Metacritic gave it a 7.9 out of 10, so how can it possibly be a bad game? Well, just hear me out on this. As a 90s kid growing up with an N64 and loving the original Banjo games, I was extremely excited when I heard they were going to be bringing a brand new game in the series. But when I finally got my hands on it, I was absolutely heartbroken. Everything that I loved about the original series had been stripped from the game and instead replaced by some bullshit vehicle construction system. Now looking back on the game as a whole now, it actually isn't as bad as I originally thought, but it makes my list because of the amount of disappointment me and other fans of the series had to endure from it. But my fingers are crossed that the upcoming indie title, Yooka-Laylee, will restore my nostalgia for the original series. Number 9 goes to Bomberman Act Zero. This sequel to a long-time great series had tried to go in a new direction with the game, but instead drove it right off a cliff. Its departure from the norm of the series left many fans with a bad taste in their mouths. Long loading times, bad collision detection, forgettable soundtrack, use of the same textures and graphics for every stage, and tedious and repetitive gameplay were just a few of this game's problems. Metacritic gave it a 3.4 out of 10, and in 2010, Game Trailers ranked it as their #1 worst sequel of all time. Next to number 8, we have Hour of Victory, which is yet another sad attempt to cash in on the Call of Duty first-person shooter craze. This game is riddled with bugs and other glaring issues. The graphics on top of that are just horrible. It looks like you are playing a PS2 game and a bad-looking one at that. But the worst part about the game is that it's just plain broken. It suffers from many game-crashing bugs, making playing through it a complete chore. It did offer an online multiplayer mode, but it was a joke compared to that of Call of Duty 4, which came out just a few short months later. IGN was quoted as saying the best and only pro about to this game is that no one is actually forcing you to play it. Number 7 goes to NFL Tour, which was developed and released by EA in 2008. And as far as football games go, this one is one of the worst I've ever played. There is really no point to trying to play any sort of defense, as it is incredibly easy to score. It is extremely arcadey, and while that's fun for a few hours, the game has absolutely no depth. If this game had been a $10 arcade Xbox Live Arcade title, it would have been a semi-decent game, but for a full $60 title, it was a colossal waste of money. It also came nowhere near the graphics of the Madden games of the time, and the once saving grace of this was an online multiplayer, but the servers quickly dried up as better football games like Madden hit the markets. If you guys are looking for an arcade style football game, I suggest picking up an older copy of NFL Blitz, as it is much better.
Sweet.
Next at number 6 is Fighters Arcade, which is an Xbox Connect title. I remember rushing out to buy a Connect day one and being so excited to play games like this with my body as the controller. But what I wasn't expecting was the Connect to suck and its games to suck even worse. The game is incredibly hard to control and will throw random headbutts and jabs and punches when you're not trying to. Needless to say, a fighting game that is hard to control is not exactly fun, especially one that you have to stand up and look like an idiot to play. As a general rule, I try to avoid Connect games, and this is also a prime example as to why.
Hey, Justin,
Cracking our top 5 is A Vampire Reign, which was published by AQ Interactive and released on July 3rd, 2007. It is a stealth survival horror game, but it came out extremely flat. The gameplay is a total knockoff of a Metal Gear or a Splinter Cell, but with weird gothic vampire feel. But the worst part about the game is how difficult they made it. Enemies are extremely fast and can kill players in just 2 hits. And the first hit usually immobilizes the player, giving the vampire sufficient time to land a second killing blow. And for the first and third of the game, players can't have any weapons that can kill vampires effectively without spending large amounts of ammunition, which is in short supply. Being an early release on the 360, the game's graphics look incredibly dated by today's standards. Take poor design, high difficulty, and mix it with bad graphics, and you get this shitstorm of an awful game. I'd stay clear of it at all costs. Number 4 goes to Leisure Suit Larry Box Office Bust. And if you're not familiar with this series, consider yourself lucky. This game is exactly what the title claims it to be, a total bust. It's a sad attempt at any sort of humor are completely off the mark, and the gameplay is boring and repetitive as it gets. I can't think of any reason for anyone to ever put this game in their system and actually play it. I would rather mow the lawn with scissors than play this turd, start to finish. It was universally hated by all review sites. IGN gave it a 2 out of 10, saying that it was hands down the worst game of 2009. If for whatever reason you come across a copy of this game, do the world a favor and just set it on fire.
Whip Josh Keaton! Find me something.
Next at number 3 is the infamous Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. There was actually a good deal of hype around this game before release, and I can remember being excited for a next-gen Sonic game on the 360. But what we got was a massive, steaming pile of dog shit. This game is riddled with game-breaking bugs, and the frame rate is just god-awful. The plot was weird as well and turned many fans of this series off immediately with its long cutscenes and bad dialogue, not to mention that it featured real-looking life people, which was just kind of confusing in the Sonic universe. But its biggest problem, however, was its controls. They made it hard to control Sonic, which ruined the flow of the game. The whole point of Sonic games is to go fast, and with bad controls, that makes it next to impossible. So that really leaves the game with no real point. The game has since become one of the most hated games and the butt of many jokes on the internet. This was a downfall of Sonic, and it's kind of too bad. Maybe one day Sonic games will be fun again, but I'm not exactly holding my breath. In our runner-up spot is Duke Nukem Forever. And back in the day, Duke Nukem was amazing with its edgy dialogue, fast-paced first-person shooter gameplay. Fans of the series had to wait over 15 years to get a next-gen sequel, and the hype train for this game was real. I was stoked to get my hands on this game and shoot some aliens and then hit the strip clubs and do all kinds of crazy things. But what we got was a total disaster of a game. It featured extremely long loading times, clunky controls, overall aging graphics, and a dated level design. It was voted as the most disappointing game of 2011. This game sucks ass and chews bubblegum, but it's all out of bubblegum. Stay clear of this one if you don't want to be severely disappointed.
It's down to you and me, you one-eyed freak.
And finally, our number 1 worst Xbox 360 game of all time goes to Jumper, Griffin's Story. And any game that is based off of an already subpar movie is typically bad, but this game takes it to a whole new level. Filled to the eyeballs with bugs, it is incredibly hard to not want to light yourself on fire while playing this game. The battle system is clunky at best, and the camera angles make playing nearly impossible. It will put the camera on the wall in the middle of a fight because, you know, it's fun to fight 10 enemies completely blind with already shitty controls. And it doesn't get much better from there. The graphics look like you're playing a low-end Dreamcast game, and the frame rate drops considerably with multiple enemies on screen. On top of that, it has some of the worst audio I've ever heard. Outside of some semi-okay voice acting, the other sound effects are just an assault on your ears. It is actually somehow more fun to play this game on mute. That is, if you guys can even stomach the game long enough to play it to begin with. Again, this is one game you can just toss in the trash, as that is where it belongs. Anyway, that is all I have for today, guys. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you guys did, please be sure to hit that like button. It really helps my channel out. You guys can do that. Also, leave me a comment down below with your least favorite Xbox 360 games. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And also, like I said, make sure to hit that like button. Also, check out some of my previous videos. I've done top 10 worst N64 games, Wii games, as well as many other gaming videos you may enjoy. Also, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more videos in your soapbox like this daily. But until next time, guys, remember there's always Game Act time somewhere. So take it easy and peace out.